So I didn't really have many options, in fact none. And so I veered over and went over the main flow, the main part of the waterfall. And as I went over the top, I have to say I sort of groaned internally and looked at it and I thought, oh man, because there was tremendous volume going over this particular drop or this waterfall, and I couldn't see a clean outflow. And I thought at the top of this that what would happen is that I would hit the bottom, immediately flip upside down. I assumed that I wouldn't be able to right myself because of the turbulence and because of the volume, and I assumed that I'd pull my spray skirt off, push myself out of the boat, get tumbled around, and spit out downstream. And that is an experience that is never pleasant. It's not fun. It's not the good part of kayaking. But it would not have been the first time that I'd been tumbled around in a rapid. That is part of kayaking. And unfortunately, it's probably not the last time either, but we all like to think that that won't happen at least. But nonetheless, that's what I assumed would happen. And I certainly didn't think about drowning. I certainly didn't think about that. But I hit the bottom, sort of preparing myself for this several minutes of misery before I popped up downstream. But instead what happened is I rocketed down and the front end of the boat became pinned in the rocks and the underwater features. And I and the boat were immediately and completely submerged under 8 or 10 feet of water that was cascading down. And the weight and the force of the current absolutely pressed my body to the front deck of the boat. And I am a spine surgeon. I am a very even-tempered, calm person. I'm very used to high-stress situations. You know, perhaps I relish them, I'm not sure. But regardless, I didn't panic. Many people have thought, oh my gosh, you must have just absolutely panicked. But no, I'm not a panicky kind of person. So I immediately set about to do those things that would either free the boat from whatever was catching it or free me from the boat. But the force of the water was such that I couldn't pull my hand back half of an inch, let alone pull my spray skirt off and push myself out. I was absolutely stuck. And I am a very concrete thinking, pragmatic sort of a person. I knew how far from shore I was. I knew my predicament. I've seen people die on the river before, and I knew that the likelihood of someone coming and saving me was as close to zero as it could be without being zero. So that was a pretty remarkable thing, and again, my thought balloon was thinking, okay, I know that I have been underwater too long to still be alive, but I feel more alive than I've ever felt. I knew that I wasn't hallucinating. I kept doing self-assessment exams. I kept thinking, okay, let me just take a moment and try to look at myself from afar, and am I screaming? Am I upset? I'm just not recognizing it. So I was having this dialogue with myself, and I could still feel the water. I could still feel the current working on my body. I could feel my body being sucked out of the boat. And at one point, I could feel my body coming out of the boat. I could feel my knees bending backwards on themselves. And yeah, that was creepy. I saw that expression, yeah. I mean, I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I could tell, I thought, yeah, that doesn't feel good. That I could feel the ligaments tearing and the bones breaking, and I still felt absolutely wonderful. I had no pain. And as my body came over the front deck of the boat, I could feel my spirit peeling away from my body, sort of like peeling apart two pieces of tape. And eventually my body broke free from the boat, and my spirit rose up and out of the river. And this is an example of a time when it's so wonderful to talk to people who get it, because the magnificence of and the intensity of this joy of just having the water fall away from me and rising up was just, as you know, indescribable. I mean, it was incredible. And so I rose up and out of the river, and I was immediately greeted by a group of somethings, people, spirits, beings. I'm never quite sure what name to give them because those words mean different things to different people, but they were people I had known forever, and I knew that they had known me for as long as I had existed. And they were so absolutely overjoyed to see me and welcome me and greet me. And I knew that they were there to guide me. I knew they were there to protect me. And I just couldn't believe it. I was absolutely overcome with a sense of being home, which again is it's so much fun to say that in a group of people who get it. I mean, I was finally home, and I was going to sleep in my own bed, and it was great. And I was surprised by that, because again, in my experience, I was still me. I was still my personality, my cynical self, really. And I was thinking, this is nuts. But I was really surprised by that sense of being home, and I was really surprised by my ability to look back at the river and see what was going on. And of course, there was this shift in time dimension. I don't know what the right words are to describe that, but of course, time and dimension really lost all meaning. And so I was able to be celebrating with these people and simultaneously watch the guys pull my body to the shore and start CPR. And so then after the first couple weeks, then I started to be less in the spiritual world, more in this world. Then I did start having pain, plenty of it, and had multiple surgeries, many, many months of rehab. And during those many months of rehab, I spent a lot of time and a lot of effort trying to figure out what it was that had happened to me. Maybe if I'd known about this group then, it would have saved me some time. But at the time, I went through all my medical records. I went through all the data I could. I listened to what everyone had to say who had been at the river, in the emergency room, in the hospital. I collected as much data as I possibly could. And then I also did research. I looked at the idea of hallucinations, and that was easy to discount that. Because of course, hallucinations or dreams are very short-lived. First of all, it's a very different quality of experience. It's a very different memory. As you all know, and as every person who's ever told a story would say, I remember the details of my experience as accurately and precisely as today as I did when it was happening. And I think it's as though we describe the event in real time. It's the present tense for us. It's not just recalling a memory. I mean, I remember big events in my life pretty well, but if I describe them year after year, 50 years into the future, well, the details will probably change a little bit. But near-death experiences, as you know, are different. The details don't change. It's a different quality of experience. So then I thought, okay, well, let's look into the physiologic effect of a dying brain. What does DMT do? What is the process? Because that's a reasonable explanation. And so I looked at the research, and I think that it's a handy explanation for people who have hypoxia of maybe a couple of minutes. And so I looked at the timetable of my experience and the people who resuscitated me, and keep in mind that this is what they do. They are professionals. They're very in tune with time. They would say I was without oxygen for 30 minutes. And within that 30 minutes were 7 minutes or so of time that they didn't realize I was gone. Because usually if you have a problem in a boat, either you see the boat or the kayaker, but not both are missing. So it took them about 7 minutes or so to figure out we were gone. It Took them another 7 minutes or so to figure out where we must be. Because as I said earlier, I was under 8 or 10 feet of water, and they couldn't really figure out where I was. Once they figured out where I must be, they started to watch, because obviously time is very important when you're talking about rescue versus recovery. So they started to watch, and from the moment they started the watch to the moment they began CPR was 15 minutes. So I tend to focus on the 15 minutes because that's the shortest objective measure of time without oxygen. And when you look at the physiology of a dying brain, you realize, and I won't get into the details, but basically by 15 minutes, it's over. I wasn't young, the water wasn't cold, there weren't other mitigating factors. By 15 minutes, survival is pretty unlikely. And survival without significant brain damage is really unheard of. And I actually was tested. My kids probably disagree with the outcome, but I didn't, I did not have apparent brain damage. And so at the end of many months of really data collection and contemplation, and also spending a lot of time meeting with ministers, clergy, because I wanted to know, how do I reconcile my experience with what I had grown up thinking. And I spent many, many months doing that, and at the end had to come to the conclusion that no, what I experienced was real, was true, just as all of you who have had an experience had to come to that conclusion.